Welcome to the Human Nature Channel. I'm your host, Alex Tamsul, and what am I doing here? Well, it's Tuesday night once again here at my dad's away from the road farm garage. If I were a real estate agent trying to describe this location, I might say this farm garage is away from the road. And it is, by 1/10 of a mile. I walked it off down the driveway wearing a pedometer once. One end of the driveway is at the front of this garage, and it goes all the way to the road. A nifty 1/10 of a mile. Now here's the thing. This is Western Pennsylvania. Woods are a big deal. If you are 1/10 of a mile away from the road, you're either in the woods, right up next to the woods, standing in a place where there used to be woods, like maybe 175 years ago. Woods are central to the identity of Pennsylvania. The second half of the name is Latin for woods. Penn's Woods. Late 1600s, William Penn showed up, looked around, said, I don't see anybody. These motherfucking woods are mine. Or the Quaker equivalent to that. I mean, woods up here in farm country. People live next to the woods. People take hikes in the woods. Even within inside the city limits of Pittsburgh, you got woods. In Greenfield, where more than likely I was conceived. No wonder I'm such a barbarian. Woods. Anyway, how about some Las Vegas shooting truth community yak, because that's why you were here. Maybe 2 videos ago, I got a very interesting comment from Tim Nichols. And I liked it, I saved it, because it fired up my imagination a little bit. I'll read you what Tim said, and then I'll read you my answer. Tim Nichols. I'm still not convinced that Paddock acted alone and or that he even fired a shot. If the LVMP and the FBI actually would have been honest from the start, then I could commit. I'm still waiting for the real evidence to appear. Anyway, I enjoyed your video and good luck at bonus hole. Thanks, Tim. Yes, I can hear bonus hole calling my name. When it comes to Paddock being a lone actor, I'm still not sure about that. Stephen Paddock used prostitutes and had child porn on his laptop in the room. That made him a prime candidate for blackmail as leverage. Also, and I don't think anybody has mentioned this yet, Paddock was unique because he had access to places most of us don't. Like the Mandalay Bay's high-limit slot room. Stephen Paddock, if he slapped enough money down, could not only get a room high up, but he could get the exact room he wanted, like 32-135. Some evildoer could look at Paddock and say, you know, that guy could come in handy one of these days. Now, what I just said is neither fact nor opinion. It's just Alex going, Yahoo! What if? Anyway, there's always something interesting here in my dad's garage. What can I show you tonight? Hanging on the wall here, we have a backpack on a frame that my brother wore on a cross-country canoe trip across Canada, maybe like 30 years ago. I remember him telling me about mosquitoes that were so full of blood they were too heavy to fly. And attached to this frame is a cloth calendar for the year 1970. Don't ask me why. Well, I think I've got everything I need. I got a jeweler's loop. For the first time in my life, I wish I had a diamond ring. I got a piece of wood with a flathead screw in it. And if I want to throw that into the furnace, I got to take that screw out. I got a screwdriver. I got a sore spot on my forehead. That's where I hit it on the open door of the furnace when I was throwing wood in. I found this over at my dad's workbench. What the hell is this? It says tracker. Is this some kind of fisherman's knife? I hope so. Hallelujah. Okay, unfortunately, Irv is not here tonight. He had an urgent meeting with his stockbroker. Don't be fooled by the tin cup like I was. But in Irv's place, I happen to have a oven thermometer. Time for your close-up, Irv, because you think you're hot stuff. My archaeology of Stephen Paddock continues, and I thought it might be an interesting idea to look at Paddock's Wikipedia page. Yes, I know, Wikipedia has a reputation for not being the most reliable source of information out there, mostly repeating what's already been said in other places, whether it's bad reporting or not. But at the bottom of the page is an extensive reference section with over 100 articles about Paddock and the Las Vegas shooting, so his Wikipedia page is not necessarily a bad place to start digging. The top paragraph of the page gives us the standard stuff on Paddock, who he was and what he did. But the early years and education section fleshes out Paddock's life in more detail. Paddock was born in Clinton, Iowa. The family lived in Clinton at the time. He grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and the Sun Valley neighborhood of Los Angeles as the oldest of four sons of Benjamin Paddock. Benjamin was a bank robber who was arrested in 1960 when Stephen was 7 years old. Benjamin was later convicted and escaped prison in 1969, subsequently appearing on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. According to Stephen's brother Eric, he was never with my mom. Paddock attended Richard E. Byrd Middle School and Sun Valley High School. He graduated from John H. Francis Polytechnic High School in 1971 and California State University, Northridge in 1977 with a degree in business administration. The first thing that grabbed my attention about Paddock, which usually escapes notice, is we have a mass shooter with a college degree, which I believe is rather rare. Omar Mateen, the Pulse nightclub shooter, did earn an Associate of Science degree in Criminal Justice Technology from Florida's Indian River State College in 2006. But when you look at most mass shooters, they were either high school students or men in their 20s and not known for any real accomplishments in the world, academic or otherwise. One huge exception would be the Aurora theater shooter James Holmes, who had a master's degree. But at the other end of the spectrum, we learned Charleston church shooter Dylan Roof had to repeat the 9th grade. Still, in terms of education, Paddock does stand out. Another thing jumping out at me as I'm reading around is that Paddock may have been our wealthiest mass shooter, putting him in a class all by himself. I can't think of any other mass shooter coming from a significant amount of personal wealth or living in a retirement community described as upscale. From a Reuters article dated October 8, 2017, in 2004, Stephen Paddock bought a 111-unit apartment complex in Mesquite, Texas for $8.4 million, partly with the proceeds from selling some smaller properties in Los Angeles. The rent from the 111 apartments in the complex gave him more than $500,000 in net income after expenses in 2011. Paddock would eventually purchase the Central Park apartments in Mesquite, paid for with a mortgage of $3.5 million and $4.9 million, largely in proceeds from the California properties. In 2014, Paddock sold Central Park Apartments and likely made $5 million to $6 million. And these are just some of Stephen Paddock's real estate ventures, a business he seemed to understand very well. Eric Paddock tells a story about Stephen's frugality. The two of them renovated a 20-unit building in Los Angeles largely themselves. Caring little about their appearances, they bought and wore cheap clothes. When Paddock owned the Central Park Apartments, he was the manager and lived on site. As a way of holding down expenses, Paddock kept the books on an Excel spreadsheet instead of paying an accountant. Paddock the gambler could be tight with a buck when he wanted to be. We are talking something of an American success story here. Making $5 million to $6 million in 2014 with his sale of the Central Park Apartments should have been a high watermark in Stephen Paddock's life, a pinnacle of sorts. Yet in 3 short years, he goes from that to dead on the floor of room 32-135 of Mandalay Bay, surrounded by guns he purchased, the wounded, dying, and dead outside some 400 yards away. In my search for Paddock's point of no return, I'm looking at the year 2014 as the height from which Stephen Paddock would fall. One last thing I focused on when it comes to making Paddock different than other mass shooters is his age. At 64, you may think Stephen Paddock was America's oldest mass shooter, but that's not exactly the case. In 1981, a 70-year-old crazy coot named William Bevins killed 5 people with an automatic weapon in an automobile shop in Kentucky. Still, Paddock at his age is way older than most mass shooters. Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole said during an interview on CBSN, "At 64, I would have expected that he would have figured out a way to handle his life's stresses." I'll leave a link to that interview in the notes, but yes, most mass shooters have been troubled young men, like Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland school shooter, who, from what I understand, came out of a seriously messed up family life. Cruz, a kid boiling with rage, you can almost understand, and maybe somebody with a heightened sense of awareness could have intervened. But Paddock? Whatever was eating him was hidden from view by his wealth and his age so well, nobody saw it coming. Stephen Paddock was a monster, of that there is no doubt. Keep in mind, when it comes to accusing him of causing misery and heartbreak on a massive scale, the police evidence is overwhelming. This means Stephen Paddock was no patsy. Technically, the definition of patsy is somebody taking the fall for a crime they didn't commit. But Stephen Paddock did this. The people in the Las Vegas shooting truth community trying to sell the idea of Paddock as some kind of patsy with their goofy-ass ideas about crisis actors and ragdolls and firing at the crowd from helicopters are sick in the head for trying to exonerate this Terminator. Why do that? Or better yet, why even bother? Paddock's toxicology report: lead, 73 micrograms per deciliter. Normal blood concentration less than 10 micrograms per deciliter. Antimony, 9.6 micrograms per liter. Normal blood concentration in unexposed individuals rarely exceeds 10 micrograms per liter. Mercury, 37 micrograms per liter. Normal concentration in whole blood is usually lower than 10 micrograms per liter, but the value of 20 micrograms per liter or below is considered normal. The presence of these heavy metals in Paddock's blood are indicative of breathing in gunsmoke. Explain that away, goofballs. One last thing, I was clued into Paddock's toxicology report by Mike Turber, during one of his recent live streams at Secrets Safe With You. Mike and Eddie. Do I want to talk about Eminem's new music video titled Darkness? A single off his new album Music to Be Murdered By? Not really. Maybe it's a generational thing, but I'm no fan of Eminem. What little I've heard from this rapper, the few clips I've seen from his videos, I didn't find anything he has to say particularly interesting. What does this guy do anyway? Make a buck off of indecency? That's all I get. Okay, so watching Eminem's new video would be a chore, but since the video also explicitly references the Las Vegas shooting, I thought, in the interest of completeness, I should at least watch it. The video, which is a semi-recreation of the Las Vegas shooting complete with a Stephen Paddock lookalike, did surprise me in two ways. One, it's a public service announcement about gun violence, complete with a warning at the beginning that the content may be activating if you have experienced gun violence in your life. And it ends with a plea for this type of violence to end. Plus, a get out the vote push. I don't know how many people are actually going to register to vote after watching this video, but you get a pretty good idea where Eminem is coming from. But the second thing the video focused on, which I found somewhat interesting, was the imagery of booze and pills. Now that could open up an entire discussion on mass shooters and their connection to mood stabilizers. But a cool cat like Eminem just drops that in the sandbox, covers it over, and moves on to what this video is really all about, which is more gun control legislation and a hint at red flag laws, which will magically make America a safe and happy place. I don't particularly believe that, but enough people do, which will make an exploitation artist like Eminem richer than he already is. But the booze and the pills in the video reminded me of something I read in the Fit Report attributed to Mary Lou Danley. On page 113, we read, Danley described Paddock as a mild-mannered person and never violent. He rarely became visibly upset and did not yell or scream when angered. If he was upset about something, Danley stated Paddock would become quiet. He seldom drank alcohol, and she never observed him consume any type of illegal narcotic. Seldom drank alcohol, she says. That sort of contradicts some things that have been reported. In an article from The Independent from October 7, 2017, titled Stephen Paddock, Las Vegas shooter was the king of microaggression, we learn others who crossed paths with Paddock in recent months described him as despondent and smelling of alcohol. When Paddock came into a Reno car dealership late this summer, he told salesman Scott Armstrong he was depressed and had relationship troubles. When's the last time somebody told you their life was miserable? It sticks with you, Mr. Armstrong said. In another article from CBS 4 out of Indianapolis, on October 6, 2017, titled, Police, despite 1,000 leads, still no clear motive in Las Vegas mass shooting. We hear from Kaylee Beig, who worked at the Great Clips in Mesquite, Paddock's hometown. She had cut Paddock's hair at least 3 times over the past 3 years, and every time he came in, always early in the morning, he smelled of booze. He would tell her that he'd been up all night gambling. The last time she saw him was 2 months before the Las Vegas shooting. So getting back to Mary Lou Danley's statement to investigators that Stephen Paddock seldom drank, I see a problem. The reported stories of Paddock in the morning with hard liquor on his breath seem outside of seldom to me. What is Mary Lou trying to do here? Make Paddock seem not quite so half bad? Sorry, there's something off about what Mary Lou is saying. The same way there's something off when she said Paddock had lost interest in sex because it left him exhausted. Although it turns out there was at least one call girl with whom Paddock had a long-standing relationship. Again, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Paddock problem. The more you look at Paddock's life, where the stories about how kind he could be rub against those where he's abrupt and condescending, or just plain creepy when he's staring at people in a casino, the more he sounds like two different people. But in terms of Paddock's sobriety, there's more. Unlike his alcohol intake, which you might not have been aware of, the stories of Stephen Paddock's use of medications has been pretty much well known in the LVS Truth community. Paddock received a prescription for 50 10-milligram tablets of diazepam, brand name Valium, according to Paul Harassim in the Las Vegas Review-Journal on October 3, 2017. Diazepam is a sedative hypnotic drug in the class of drugs known as benzodiazepines, which studies have shown can trigger aggressive behavior. Chronic use or abuse of sedatives such as diazepam can cause violent acts and psychotic episodes. An interesting wrinkle in all this appears in an article from Harassim 4 days later, where he writes, "Marksmen regularly use it. When it comes to using Valium to steady one's hand, a Henderson, Nevada physician named James Gabroy, who himself enjoys target shooting in the desert, said there is a more plausible explanation to Paddock's act of savagery than Valium's negative side effects. Of Valium, Gabroy said, that's exactly what it's used for by many who shoot." With what we know about Stephen Paddock's drinking, assuming those stories weren't planted, combined with his use of medications which say explicitly on the label not to consume alcohol while using this product, we enter an unknown mental territory where the synergistic effects of booze and pills can be more or less unpredictable. John Weinreich, a former executive casino host at Reno's Atlantis, in the Independent article stated, Paddock had a God complex and expected quick service no matter how busy the staff was. Somehow that doesn't surprise me one little bit. The FBI agent in charge of the Las Vegas shooting, Aaron Rouse, has said, "If you know something, say something. We will not stop until we have the truth." What I know is a dickhead egomaniac YouTuber named John E. Hoover, a J. Edgar Hoover by any other name, needed to get his "we won't stop" hashtag from somewhere. Why not an FBI agent, huh? There, I said it. And Hoover John Cullen's video attempts to answer Eminem's Darkness video with some Def Jam poetry of his own is almost too retarded for words. There, I said that too. Well, that's it for this time. Please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Please like, subscribe, share, throw money at me. You know the drill. Have a good one.